this is not an isolated situation, neither is it new. When I saw the image of the book, The Negro, a Beast, that book was probably written, as I recall, somewhere around 1903. But there were a number of other books similar that came out to justify and rationalize apartheid in America at that particular time. So that when we look at the history of America, particularly as it relates to race, there's a certain continuity that is dialectical in the sense of these opposites, and it's like a pendulum that swings in one direction or the other. After the Civil War, the beginning of the end of the 19th century, when racism became consolidated as an ideology, it became the rationale to justify apartheid in America. It was always challenged, but Du Bois talked about it in terms of the veil, and we saw a rupture happen in the veil after World War I, and another one after World War II, to make a long story short. Why was that important? Because people of all races were fighting against apartheid. And finally, that mountain came down. What we see now is a reaction, a counter-revolution, a counter-struggle to the gains and achievements that were made. And I think we have to put that into context. When you read Du Bois's Souls of Black Folk back in 1903, he talks about the reaction from white people when the slaves were free. And when the Freedmen Bureau attempted to bring them up, it's almost verbatim in terms of the language that was used then that we hear now. Only it's more sophisticated, and we're watching the new right confiscate and co-opt civil rights language, using our victories against us, and talking about a post-race America. In reality, they're in denial. It's much more subtle now, but nevertheless, the goals and objectives are the same. Yeah. And what I want young people to understand is they got to contextualize it and see the larger picture. Yeah. And that is, there is a movement, basically, and we have not seen this before, but we see millionaires and billionaires co-opting America through the instrument of corporations and banks. They have come out, they've come out front, and their agenda is very clear. For one, it's about privatization of everything. Secondly, it's about less government, which gives them then the right to exploit and oppress whoever and how much they want to exploit and oppress. Thirdly is to remove funding for social programs, which would certainly devastate most Americans, including poor whites, who are already devastated. So this is their larger agenda. And the strategy has been, and I would encourage everyone to read Shock Doctrine, is to exploit and take advantage of various crises. Right in North Carolina, we're fighting the situation now where millionaires have come out front, such as Pope and Koch brothers and others, who are investing huge amounts of dollars into these right-wing organizations to carry out the agenda. And they have moved on city councils, on school boards, etc. So I think in terms of looking at connecting all of this together, it's not new. there's a continuity, a historical continuity that has been in this contradiction and conflict forever, and it affects all minorities. And I wanted to say lastly that there's a relationship between Sambo and mascots. And so it's important that we oppose all of it, all of these negative images that make us, that reinforce inferiority, which is, again, at the heart of racism.
We're about to move into a fascinating period of time. I told myself when Barack Obama kept rising as a really viable presidential candidate the last time around, I thought, this is going to be the most illuminating election in American history. We're going to find a lot about who we are. I was wrong. It's his re-election when we're going to find out a lot about who we are in America. By the way, I want to quickly mention hello to everybody who's watching us online. This is being broadcast live right now by Tell Us USA, so great to have you if you're watching us at home. Before we move, because I've now got a number of questions, and those of you who are still filling out cards, you can pass those forward, and we'll let the panel address these in just a few moments. But before we do that, I wanted to allow Dr. Pilgrim to weigh in on this idea, this conversation about where young people are supposed to be left with what they see today. I can see somebody walking through your museum and coming out really resolved to erase an so much ugliness in American history, but you can also see somebody coming out really angry and bitter.
I think the most common response people have, including young people, when they come into the museum is a kind of reflective sadness. If it stays there, then we fail, the people that work in the museum. This is my fear. I'll just do it this way. I gave a talk years ago in Madison, Wisconsin. And after it was over, I did what I did before I started here, which is to walk up to young people and say, what kind of grades are you making? Are you making all A's or whatever? And there was a young man who had listened to me, and he had really, really listened. And he said to me, what difference does it make? And I realized that I needed to change something about my presentation, because we don't need me helping with the defeatism that is already a part of many communities. And so I like the way you started this earlier, which is about finding the balance. The reality is some really bad things happened in our history, and some of them continue today. However, we have to do what my parents did, which is to tell those stories, but not only those stories. And I think my generation failed in part because it was ashamed of those stories. And so it stopped talking about, Judge Johnson, he didn't just have knockout power in both hands. He had one of the first 3 patents for what we would call today a screwdriver. Okay? Well, I think what's necessary then is to teach our young people the whole story. Talk to them about George Washington Carver, Booker T. Washington, some of the people that don't make it in the February stuff. But then also challenge them. Challenge them. I challenge every young person that comes into the museum with a simple challenge, and that is this: make something. Tell a new story. Christopher Bing, the illustrator, talented illustrator, we were debating one time because he wanted to clean up Little Black Sambo, and he redrew the pictures and changed some of the language, because for him, it was a nostalgic reminder of good times with his father. And I was trying to explain to him that for many African Americans, that's not what it represents. It represents something bad. And so I challenged him to use his incredible mind to tell a new story. Yeah. So for our young people, we owe them the truth, but we also owe them to inspire them and to challenge them and to say to them what my parents said to me, which is, up until 6 years ago, you couldn't go in that library, and one day soon, you'll be director of that library if you want to be.
We'll start to make our way through the questions that we've received, and just sort of give me the high sign there if it's something that you feel that you want to weigh in on. If it's not particularly directed at you, Barbara McQuade, this one is directed at you, referring